Oh, you know what? Hey, I'm sorry, Sean. I forgot my microphone. Hang on for 1 second. Sorry. All right. There we go. Sorry about that. Yep. All right. Yep. What's up, Dolphins fans? Welcome to this week's edition of Dolphins Deep Dive. I am Chris Perkins, your Miami Dolphins columnist for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. That's David Furones. He works with me. He is your Dolphins beat writer for the Sun Sentinel. And today, we start off the show on a very human note, heavy hearts. Damar Hamlin, the Buffalo Bills safety, remains in critical condition in a Cincinnati hospital as a result of a play in last night's postponed game against the Buffalo Bills. Hamlin was making a tackle in the first quarter on T. Higgins. He went down, immediately stood up, went back down. He was eventually given CPR, taken to a hospital in an ambulance, and he remains in critical condition right now. We don't have any further word on his condition aside from, I believe, at 10 a.m. this morning, the NFL referees issued a statement, commending the medical people who attended to Damar Hamlin and saying that he remains in critical condition. David Furones, I will bring you in here because this game does have some implications on the Dolphins' playoff hopes. And just as a bizarre aside, it's another incident that has happened in Cincinnati. Ryan Shazier, he was injured in Cincinnati. Tua Tagovailoa injured in Cincinnati. Antonio Brown took that hit from Vontaze Burfict in Cincinnati. They have a good trauma center there, so they're well versed. But those fans have seen a lot in Cincinnati as far as unfortunate incidents such as we saw last night. Furones, what did you think of the incident, and what do you think will happen with the game, and what will its effect be on the Dolphins' playoff hopes, do you think?
Yeah, Perk, obviously difficult to just talk about football when we just witnessed what we did last night. And first of all, everything else is secondary. We're going to put on this show because that's what we do. We have a Dolphins program, and that's what we're going to talk about. But it is difficult, and everything else really moves on to the back burner until we know that Damar Hamlin is okay, obviously in critical condition right now. So that's where all our thoughts are and prayers with him and his family. But we will try to talk about Dolphins football and their outlook, which is affected by down the road when these decisions are made after everything has been securely completed and seeing how Damar Hamlin's doing and just making sure health-wise all the information is out there. What happens with this Bills game and then the implications on the Dolphins needing a Bills win, that's all going to come to the forefront from the Miami Dolphins perspective as before last night, before that happened, all the thoughts across the NFL community were the playoff implications from this game, where the Bills have number one seed at stake if they can win and then win out, and how that affects the Dolphins needing the Bills win next week against the Patriots. And now kind of everything else is secondary as we focus on Damar Hamlin's health first. But so it will be hard to talk about football, but we're gonna try. So the show will go on, but it will be tough.
Yeah, it'll be tough. And again, as David said, our thoughts and prayers are with Damar Hamlin and his family. We hope for a full recovery. Let's shift gears to the Dolphins here, David. The Dolphins have their season finale against the New York Jets, 1 p.m. Sunday, Hard Rock Stadium. Dolphins on the 5-game losing streak, 8-8 record entering this game. Basically, if the Dolphins win and New England loses against Buffalo, the Dolphins are in. The Dolphins could be starting the rookie 7th-round pick Skylar Thompson at quarterback, or they could be starting the veteran Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy is dealing with a dislocated pinky finger on his right hand, which is his throwing hand. Also, the Dolphins could be forced to sign a third quarterback this week. We'll keep an eye on that situation. We're also keeping an eye on other injuries. Left tackle Teron Armstead, cornerback Xavian Howard, edge rusher Bradley Chubb. They're all attempting to return from injuries that caused them to miss last week's loss 23-21 at New England. And with all this as the backdrop, the Dolphins are trying to avoid what could be the biggest collapse in franchise history, as Dave Hyde so well pointed out this week. He pointed out so well this week in a column. This would surpass the 1993 collapse, in which the Dolphins were 9-2, lost their last 5, finished 9-7, missed the playoffs. On the other hand, hey, maybe the Dolphins get in, maybe they win a playoff game. Let's dive in. All right, Furones, so what's your best guess of what happens this week at quarterback, and do the Dolphins have a chance? Look, again, Skylar Thompson, the 7th-round pick, but the Dolphins were beaten by a 7th-round pick, Brock Purdy, out in San Francisco, and he's got the 49ers rolling. So you could go with the rookie 7th-round pick, Skylar Thompson. There's precedent for a 7th-round pick playing well this season, or you go with the veteran, Teddy Bridgewater. And let me point this out, Furones. During this 5-game losing streak, Dolphins quarterbacks, all 3 of them, Tua, Skylar, Teddy, 85 of 57, 54.1% completions, 1,249 yards, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 78.2 passer rating. So who should start and who gives them the best chance to win?
Well, I think it's all eyes on Teddy Bridgewater and his dislocated pinky. If you can get Teddy Bridgewater ready, then I would go with him again. And the critical day will be Wednesday, that Wednesday morning update that we get from Mike McDaniel. So if we do hear something positive about Teddy Bridgewater's status, then he can practice the full week as the starter, approaching it as a starter, and then that serves to his benefit. If he's not in a good spot with that pinky, then you're starting the week of practice with Skylar Thompson under that role. Now, we have seen Skylar Thompson come into games. He had to come in for Teddy Bridgewater after the first play of the game, the first time they played the Jets, and that didn't go too well for the Dolphins. They were in it to start the fourth quarter, but then obviously that fourth quarter just went all downhill in the Meadowlands in Week 5. Skylar Thompson did perform moderately well early in the game against the Vikings. The next week, when he did start, and then he had to leave with his finger injury, was it back then? This is all so long ago. It's been such a long season. But when the Dolphins had those 3 consecutive weeks where a starting quarterback didn't finish a game, and then Teddy Bridgewater closed that one out, almost got them back in it with a comeback in the fourth quarter. But we saw that Dalvin Cook touchdown to seal it for the Vikings. So, I would go with the veteran. Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater managed the game well for the most part. Up until that pick 6, he had the Dolphins in position to win. They had the lead. He had an impressive drive to get them down, and then that flip touchdown pass to Raheem Mostert for the touchdown. That was good improvisation down by the goal line, and was mistake-free up until that point, which you knew kind of was the thing that the Dolphins needed to avoid against the Patriots. I know Mike McDaniel wanted to. He got a little conservative, running so often on first down to avoid that costly pick 6, and then it still ended up happening. And then, of course, you lose Teddy on that play, and Skylar Thompson never really got the offense moving, never really had a chance to retake the lead up until it was a 2-possession game, and the Patriots kind of played a softer defense, and he drove them down, but then couldn't recover the onside kick. So if I can, I'm going to go with Teddy Bridgewater, and this is all really because of the Damar Hamlin situation. It's not really set in stone if this Week 18 is still going to occur the same way. We have to find out what the any implications on the schedule will be, which, of course, again, is all secondary to Damar Hamlin's health. But now if the NFL feels like it needs to finish this game because of the playoff implications that Bills Bengals game on Monday night, then who knows what that means for the Week 18 slate. But if it remains on the same schedule, then and obviously we know if that's the case, then Tua Tagovailoa is out of the equation, as Mike McDaniel has said early this week on Monday. Then I would try Teddy if he's able to go, and then Skylar Thompson, you roll with him if Teddy cannot start off the week of practice with getting the practice reps.
And David, we are talking quarterback right now, but you've been on Twitter, you're out in the streets, you talk to Dolphins fans, people are hot right now. People want their pound of flesh. And so we're going to go to Twitter and we'll be, again, thanks to everybody for sending in your questions when requested. We're going to bounce around on a few topics here. But here's one question that a bunch of people have asked. And this one comes from FC. I think it's FC Aprils. I don't know. I don't know what the handle is there. Capriles. I don't know. Anyway, possible defensive coordinator targets for the Dolphins, Furones. And there's been a lot of heat on Josh Boyer. To me, I'm not sure that he's going to be fired. Let's wait and see how this Jets game turns out. Let's wait and see how the season ends. You know me, I think this is more on the offense than the defense. But if there is a replacement, I would immediately look at Coach Mike McDaniel's past and see guys who have been on the same staff with him, or maybe there's somebody that one of the Shanahans, Mike or Kyle Shanahan, recommends, maybe somebody that Matt LaFleur, the Green Bay coach, recommends. They're all on the same Shanahan coaching tree. That's where I would look initially if there's a replacement. Look at McDaniel's past. What are your thoughts very, very quickly on the DC?
Sure, that's a good point. Boy, if only D'Amico Ryans could be grabbed from the 49ers, that they work together. But I think he'll have bigger plans in the future with the way he's going with that 49ers defense. Well, I mean, I also still think back to Vic Fangio last year. Yep. I mean, that would be we know he was reported as a target by our Omar Kelly at the time, who now does a fine job with I Am Athlete, and so I don't know all the ins and outs of what transpired in those talks, but that's a former NFL head coach and obviously a strong defensive mind. He's currently a defensive consultant with the Philadelphia Eagles, if I'm not mistaken. So, and obviously getting up there in age a little bit, but still, that would be someone who would intrigue me. Haven't looked that deep into it until anything does actually happen with Josh Boyer. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But right now this is Josh Boyer's defense, and he still has one more week to prove something in the regular season. And then, hey, if it's a great defensive game that the Dolphins play against the Jets, I know it's just the Jets offense, and the quarterback situation there is always up in the air, and it's a home game which the Dolphins defense has been better at home. But if suddenly something transpires that gets the Dolphins into the playoffs, and then maybe there's a run, then maybe all this conversation is all for naught. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But I mean, Fangio since last year is a name that has intrigued me. Yeah,
and look, I ride with this defense. I will point this out, that both backup quarterbacks, Bridgewater and Skyler, gave the Dolphins a chance to win in the fourth quarter, and that defense only allowed 16 points last week. The Dolphins lost 23-21, but there was a pick six. So when your defense only allows 16 points, you've done a good job. You have given your team a chance to win. Again, fans want their pound of flesh, so we're going to stay on Twitter. This one comes to us from Mad Max Dial. Any chance there will be a change at GM? I think the fan base is going to want someone held accountable, and who better than the man who is in charge of putting this team together? So, look, once again, I will say let's let this thing play out. As we both just said, who knows, maybe the Dolphins get in and maybe they win a playoff game. So who knows? Let's let this thing play out. You don't have to make any decisions today on January 3rd. So the speculation about Josh Boyer, the speculation about Chris Greer, let's hold off. Let's wait till the season is over, till we've gathered all the information, and then go ahead and make a prudent decision, not something from a fiery, emotional standpoint when you're riding a 5-game losing streak.
Yeah, some of the fan base's opinions on Chris Grier, it fluctuates so much in season. I mean, from just the days before they signed Armstead with the fire Chris Grier because we don't have an offensive tackle, to then you get the prize free agent and now you love him again, and then the next day he trades for Tyreek Hill and you love everything about everything he's doing, and then now you're going to judge him based on a 5-game losing streak, which is really taking place on the field. Now, some of the roster construction with guys that have an injury history is coming into play right now, so I understand from that aspect. But I mean, just a few weeks ago, everyone was so pleased with this roster construction, and we even said how talented this team is. And I mean, far more talented than last year's roster. So I'm not going to put all this blame on Chris Grier in this case. We have to let this play out, see if this roster is healthy going forward. And then now, if it continues to be an issue where health concerns with all the players that this franchise has acquired do come back up time and time again, then yeah, that is a significant issue that has to be looked upon. But I wouldn't just fall off the deep end that quickly, just because we were also thrilled with how this roster was constructed at 8-3, and then now because lost some road games in a difficult scheduling part of the season to some really good teams. Had a quarterback suffer a second concussion and lost another game. And then now, obviously, with the backup quarterback going on the road against a division rival, lost a 5th straight game. Not the position you want to be in. But let's not make grand determinations on the general manager based off that, is what I would say. But that clock will eventually run out if these things continue to be an issue. But I wouldn't look at it this offseason, even if the collapse were to take place and become complete and the Dolphins miss the playoffs. But would be a thing going forward where maybe on the hot seat if it continues to be a problem going into next year as well.
All right. And Furones, when we look ahead, the biggest question to me is Tua Tagovailoa. That's a bigger question than Chris Grier, because that's an unfilled position of leadership. The Tua plan's got to be scrutinized and re-examined because he's having trouble staying healthy. Doesn't mean you're going to scrap it, but it's got to be scrutinized and re-examined by the Dolphins. I'll say this also, that look, they can still beat the Jets even without Tua. I think that Tua's presence has been overstated in these losses, and that's because most of these losses have also occurred with Xavian Howard and or Teron Armstead missing the game. So it's tough to just isolate Tua's absence and say that's the reason they lost. Now, obviously, that's a major, major factor. He's your best quarterback, and he's been playing well. But these losses without Tua don't just happen in a vacuum, okay? There are other factors in these losses. And you know, as we speak about Tua and what happens here, we go back out to Twitter, and this question comes to us from Finn for Life 1. And the question is, why invest more time and money with an injury-prone quarterback? And I will say this, Furones, that you know, number one, we don't know the full story on Tua. You know, maybe he by some miracle gets full medical clearance and he's ready to play for the wild card game. I don't think that happens, but you expect him to be out there for OTAs and training camp. But the problem is, you know, a regular hit could sideline him for weeks. And so how do you progress if you are the Dolphins with that in mind? So that's but I would say, to answer the question, why would you invest more time and money into an injury-prone quarterback? Number one, we don't know the full situation yet. And number two, you wouldn't want Tua to go somewhere and excel for somebody else, a la Drew Brees, right? So, I know that's picking the extreme example, the Hall of Famer. But I think those are a couple of reasons why you would invest more time and money into Tua. Your thoughts, Furones, what would you do? Would you invest more time and money in Tua as we sit here right now?
Well, the $1 million question is the 5th-year option that
Right.
will be due by May, if I'm not mistaken. Which now Tua didn't make the Pro Bowl on the first ballot, the opening ballot, so he could get in as a replacement. But that saves about $5 million or so for something maybe in terms of the 5th-year option. But you can't go the long-term extension route with what you've seen, that's for sure. So we can cross that off. And then now it's you have him next year under contract. So I think he showed enough when he's healthy that you do want him. So you're not going to make an immediate change. But now whether you want to pick up that 5th-year option at the time being, then that'll be maybe you take it 1 year at a time because you have seen these injury concerns, be it both the concussions that have now come up at least twice that we know of, 3 blows to the head that have put his injuries under, whether you want to call it speculation. A lot of people speculated that there was a previous concussion in the Buffalo game, the first one, but we do know of at least 2 diagnosed concussions, and then obviously the long list of injuries that he's had beyond that, whether it be in college with the ankle and the hip injury, and then last year with the finger, and then and before that missing 3 games. What was his first name? Well, but it's been several different things. So that's a concern going forward as far as if you're going to invest long term. But you do have them next year, and then so I would say, especially with the way that the roster is tied up, the salary cap situation, it would take a lot of maneuvering to make a big splash move for a quarterback, and obviously you don't have a first round pick after previously having 2 of them for this upcoming draft class, one of them taken away by the NFL's penalty in when the Dolphins were deemed to have tampered with Tom Brady and Sean Payton, and then the other one traded away for Bradley Chubb now. So so that comes into to play as well as a factor. But so you do have next year, and then I would see probably what you have going forward. Maybe you want to take it 1 year at a time, and then not pick up the 5th-year option at this point in time.
All right, and one more Tua question / concern on Twitter. It comes to us from Raven1014, and it goes to something that I believe you addressed last week in the Dolphins Q&A that we do on Tuesdays. And here's what Raven1014 says. Tua injury history going back to college: dislocated hip, surgery; broken finger, surgery; ankle sprain, surgery; ankle tightrope procedure; fractured ribs, finger fracture, and now a possible 3rd concussion in a 3-month span. At what point does he retire for his health? Furones, I'll let you start off on that one.
Well, thank you for listing those. That was the one I couldn't remember, the ribs. There we go. So now we've got the complete injury history. As I couldn't pop that one up off the top of my head, and I covered it last year too. So his question was about if he should retire. Well, I mean, I don't want to make decisions for the young man. That's going to be a decision for him to make. Obviously, you weigh in the injury concerns, and now having at least 2 concussions, like we said. A lot of people want to say 3 this season alone. Now, we have seen stories where guys who have a concussion history then bounce back from them. I mean, Jalen Phillips had multiple concussions in his time at UCLA. He took the year off when he momentarily retired, transferred to the University of Miami, and he hasn't had really any injury problems since, any significant ones at least. You know, he's been on the injury report for stuff, been questionable for games, but since he was at UM and then his 2-year career thus far with the Dolphins, he's had a pretty clean slate and has gotten through things. So yeah, there are stories where guys can bounce back and then not suffer through similar injury, just a long list of ailments like they have in the past. But that's going to be a decision up to him. He'll weigh that out. He'll weigh out how, hey, he's a family man. Family's really important to him. He's got a young son now. I'm sure he wants longevity in life and doesn't want any long-term health effects. So I'm sure he'll be doing a lot of his own research. And, I don't think it's my place to tell him what he should do. That it's totally up to him. He's a competitor as well. So I know he's passionate. He's passionate about family. He's passionate about football. And then those things are going to be weighed out for him, and he's going to make his own decision.
Right, I agree. Look, he's a family man, but he's a highly competitive professional athlete who's doing something that he loves. So it's going to be a tough decision for him to retire or dial it back or whatever. Let's give him his space. Let's give him his time. He'll make that decision. I have no idea. I mean, me personally, I would say to Tua, push it as far as you can within reason. And within reason, that comes from, your consideration of your responsibilities as a father and a husband, talking to your family, talking to medical professionals, but live the dream. Live the dream as much as possible. So, we'll see what happens. Let me say this, Furones, to put a bow on this segment. I'm a big believer in you've got to be able to win with your backup quarterback. And I tweeted this yesterday that, look, there are teams in this league throughout the history that do really good things after losing their starting quarterback for a period of time or the rest of the season. 2015 Broncos won a Super Bowl when Peyton Manning went down and Brock Osweiler came in. 2017 Eagles won a Super Bowl. Carson Wentz goes down. Nick Foles comes in. How about your 72 Dolphins? Bob Greasy goes down. Earl Morrall. So there are numerous, just because your quarterback is out, that's no excuse. You should construct a complete team so that you can still win, even if your starting quarterback goes down. There's precedent in the league, and that's what I would like to see the Dolphins do, and that's what I would like to see if they've done. If there are things for Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel that you want to really test them on this roster construction and how to use your existing talent on the roster when you're without one of your top players.
I'll give you a couple more. 2001 Patriots. Tom Brady, the legend of Tom Brady, was born off of Drew Bledsoe's hit from Mo Lewis early in that season. How about 2022 49ers? Look at what they're doing right now. Yep. Brock Purdy. Good teams can win with their backup quarterback. And, hey, this goes back to the defense, honestly. Week one, what was Mike McDaniel saying? This is still the defense's team. When they won that, 20-7 game against the Patriots at home in the opener, defense scored a touchdown in that one. Now you see the flip side, playing in Foxborough, defense scored the game-changing touchdown for the Patriots, and they've done that so often in order for them to win games as they've had Mac Jones go through some of his struggles, flipping him with Bailey Zappi at some point in the season, and then reconfirming their faith in Mac Jones. We actually played a fine game just this last time out against the Dolphins, but against a very injury-depleted secondary that looks vastly different from what it did early in the year. But, just between the defense underperforming and being plagued by injuries, and that's part of the equation as to why this team ended up just so offense dependent and dependent on having its starting quarterback. Say what you will about Tua, but the records do show. And then when the Dolphins have had to go to their backup quarterbacks, some instances have been managed well, but then you just don't see the offensive produce as prolifically as it was when Tua was in there and healthy.
Yeah, and that you're such a professional, Furones. See, this is why I like working with you, because you lead us perfectly into our next segment. Look at you, man. All right, so this Dolphins offense, is the Dolphins offense overrated? Is Mike McDaniel overrated? Now, here's why I put this up here. And, I wrote the column from the game that the offense has not done its job. The offense stinks right now. And I think the offense shares more responsibility for the team being 8-8 than the defense and the special teams. Here's why. This Dolphins offense has not outscored any good teams this season aside from that fourth quarter at Baltimore, right? You beat Buffalo 21-19. Technically, I guess you outscored them. You beat New England 20-7. Right. So it's not like you're scoring 30 points against playoff-bound teams, against quality teams. This offense shrinks in big games. It just does. And Mike McDaniel, his part, he hasn't adjusted to the adjustments that opponents have made in the last 5 games. I think the offense is overrated. I don't think Mike McDaniel is overrated. I think Mike McDaniel is a rookie coach who is learning the ins and outs of the NFL. This is part of being a rookie coach. Use your running game better, Mike McDaniel. Use Mike Gesicki, Mike McDaniel. Be able to rally this team for one more victory down the stretch in December and January, Mike McDaniel. But he's a rookie head coach. This offense, this offense has a quarterback, or had, in Tua, who is in MVP discussions. A wide receiver in Tyreek Hill, who is a future Hall of Famer, set the franchise record for receptions and receiving yards. Jalen Waddle, back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Teron Armstead, Pro Bowl left tackle. Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, familiar with the offense from being with McDaniel back in San Francisco, right? Austin Jackson, first-round pick, right tackle. Liam Eichenberg, second-round pick, left guard. Robert Hunt, third-round pick, right guard. Like, this is where your talent is on this team. You are an offensive team. Outscore the Jets this week. Take it upon yourself to be able to lift this team and carry them. You guys, the offense, you're the ones with the superstars. You're the ones who are this team's calling card. Get out there and score 30 points this week. And I know Tua's not going to be there, but score 30 points and put this game away early. Unlike you did against Houston, where you scored 30 in the first half, didn't score in the second half, and we're kind of crossing your fingers that Houston didn't score that one other touchdown and come within a score. So I think this offense is overrated, Furones.
Well, and Perk, that was a hot take on your part when you said don't put the blame on defense and special teams. Maybe I'm twisting your words a little bit, but you can't absolve this defense and special teams. We know they haven't played complementary football. We've talked about this all year. So I saw your column and I quote tweeted and said I choose to blame everyone because it's all units that have really underperformed. Listen, we just mentioned in the last segment that we started the season with it being the defense's team. We felt like the offense, despite the superstardom, we knew Jalen Waddle was rising. We know the star that Tyreek Hill is and what he was going to be able to do. Now, it has been underwhelming to see the way this offense has not been able to work Mike Gesicki into it more than it has, and also has not been effective on the ground, which was one of Mike McDaniel's calling cards in San Francisco, where he was run game coordinator before he was offensive coordinator, and that hasn't really come to fruition. But this season started as a defensive team. That was the unit that was together, that was entirely basically kept intact from last year's unit that was so hot the second half of the year, granted against some backup quarterbacks, but was really a dominant top 5 defense over that stretch. And then that has not at all been the case outside of some of the early wins. You mentioned the first one against Buffalo where they were on the field for so long, and then they still were able to pull it off, get the stops necessary. The Patriots win to start off the season. Maybe some instances where they had some bad games overall, but then you saw them get the late stops, second half stops in Detroit and Chicago. And then you felt like it was coming together entirely in the wins against Cleveland and Houston, but then that just all came crashing back in this 5-game losing streak that followed as the calendar turned to December. And then now into 2023. But now, Mike McDaniel, we haven't seen a lot of what was hyped up about his creativity, innovativeness on offense. This is his first year as a play caller, so that is one thing. He's also a rookie, not just as a head coach, but as a play caller. So some of those things come into play. And, I am kind of concerned that we haven't seen the more creative ways to just get the ball into Tyreek Hill's hands, Jalen Waddle's hands, like the 49ers offense of the past was able to do with Deebo Samuel. And even when you have a backup quarterback, you could work them in, just make sure they get their touches and let them do their thing in the open field. And you haven't had as many instances where that has occurred. And then the other area of criticism beyond just the offense with Mike McDaniel would be some of his game management. You see a lot of instances where he's burning timeouts in situations that where you shouldn't. Some second half timeouts in the third quarter. We saw one at the goal line. Now they did end up scoring on the drive, but that ends up proving costly later when you need to save all the time you can. eventually as the Patriots had the lead later in the game. And challenging plays, that has been his replay review system that he has with this team has been a struggle all year. As now with the latest one, which could have gone either way. I don't think it was a bad challenge by Mike McDaniel, but now he's 0 for 4 on challenges this year and has missed at least 4 that I could think of that I detailed in one of last week's stories, a Tuesday notebook from last week, if anyone wants to look it up, down at the bottom there. And 4 different instances throughout the year where he had opportunities to challenge a play that would have been overturned. He did not challenge. Some of those cases did come down to losing a second half timeout if you miss. But sure, there are a lot of areas where you can blame Mike McDaniel. And then I think now that honeymoon period from early in the season is over now at this 5-game losing streak. I don't think his job is at stake for next year because he is just a first-year head coach and has had a lot of adversity with injuries occur. But now that could be something if this collapse ends up becoming complete and whole, then going into next year, that will be something that then it carries throughout the whole offseason and then into next year where he could quickly become on the hot seat if next year does not go as planned.
Yeah, and you know what? And I'll say this, Furones, that look, there have been a lot of disappointments on this team during this 5-game losing streak, just as there were so many success stories earlier during the 5-game winning streak. So, we'll see how this thing turns out and what kind of changes are made. But I would just like to see the offense doing more stuff. And again, this is the unit that we thought was going to be the standout unit. And that takes us to Twitter again. This is a question from J7 Kilo. First off, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you. Why is the offense so inconsistent? Even with Tua, some games they would score 30 and others they would struggle to hit 20. And I think that's just the result of, again, a rookie head coach, a quarterback who is just kind of still finding himself. And, your offensive line was a little bit disjointed this year, whether you're talking about Connor Williams playing center for the first time or Austin Jackson being in and out of the lineup, Liam Eichenberg not quite being settled or excelling there at left guard for the whole season. So you do have some issues with this team, and it's a team that's still growing. Look, you didn't expect this team to hit its full stride this year. This is the first year for this team. So I do have some understanding, and I do understand that they get some wiggle room and some leeway. But, you would just like to see a little bit more from this team at this point.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with the matchups when inconsistent play occurs. Obviously, San Francisco 49ers, that's kind of where this rough patch began, and that's the number 1 rated defense in the NFL. And they still had their moments in that game. I mean, schemed up that Trent Sherfield touchdown to start the game, and Tua, I think, had it in his mind that he didn't have Teron Armstead in that game. He was maybe a little bit off balance with his throws, and I know there were some things with route timing that weren't there in that game. So some of these you got to look at the individual games. The next week against the Chargers, they came out with a great game plan, and they played physical with the receivers on the outside, took away the middle of the field. Took some aspects of what the 49ers did well, put their own twist to it, and then had their own successful game plan to really limit what the Dolphins did. And the Mike McDaniel did not make the adjustments in that game. So really kind of lucked into one touchdown with Tyreek Hill returning an offensive fumble and grabbing it. And then that's just, hey, you got the fastest guy on the field, and he ended up in a very fortunate situation. And then out of so many attempts down the field deep that Tua had in that game against what the Chargers were showing, then he did hit one, which was the later Tyreek Hill touchdown, but missed several of those. So some of those, it really comes down to the matchup. And then obviously the second half against Green Bay, that game was going very well up until let's face it, when Tua had the play where it is suspected that he suffered his concussion, and it's speculation on how much it affected him. I know the offense wasn't moving as well as far as getting in position, the motions, everything that's required on the offense from when Mike McDaniel and offensive coaches reviewed the tape, and that's what initially led them to question Tua and determine that he did suffer a concussion in that game, or at least showed the symptoms to follow on Monday. So I don't know how much that played a factor in how that game transpired, but it seems like it was a factor.
Yeah, it seems like it was. And look, Furones, when we talk about this team for next year, we'll go back out to Twitter for this question from Matthew DeRosiers, and it says, "Can you see X being a cap casualty next year?" Let's just say this. Do you think Xavian Howard is back next year? And do you think he's going to be better than he was this year? And look, we know he made the Pro Bowl. Whether he deserved it, I don't think so, but whatever. Will he be back next year, and will he be better? Will he return to his Pro Bowl form? I'll ask you like that.
Well, I think as far as for next year, I would have to look up his contract, but I think the contract is more of a second year out, more so than on the restructure than this next season. I have to look it up to confirm it. But so the likelihood is that you do stick with him unless you find, if you want to trade him, someone to take him. But I think he could very well be much better next season. I mean, he had the groin injuries early. I know that's something that groin injuries linger. You don't just heal from them and then you're fine. They stick with, even if you're able to play through it, then it's still something you have to be cautious with, and could limit your ability to run at full stride. So those last. Now he's getting professional treatment, of course, so it's not like when I suffered mine playing softball recreationally. But it's something that can limit you for quite a while. So and now you had the knee injury sustained in practice. I think it's just been unfortunate this year. I do see a potential bounce back in the future. He is still now, he's getting into 29, 30 by next year. So that's kind of a tough spot, but there could be a potential out after that if it continues to go down the negative side with X next season.
Yeah, I think X will be back, and they're not going to cut him. I don't think they're going to trade him. Look, let's look at it like this also, that if X is gone and you assume Byron Jones probably will not be back, what are you left with? You've got Cater, Kogu, and what? And so hope you cross your fingers and hope Nick Needham returns to form. But we'll see. But you need X at this point, right? Because he's your best corner. You don't know if Byron Jones is coming back. Noah, I mean, right? And Keon Crossan and Cater. So at this point, you need Xavian Howard, and the chances are he does return to Pro Bowl form or to top form. So I would plan.
He was still a Pro Bowler this year.
Yes, you're
even
right.
said he was surprised about that, but
yeah. Maybe I should say return to All Pro form. Would that be more appropriate? Yeah. Maybe X would appreciate that a little bit more. I don't know if he watches the show, but maybe he would appreciate that. He's probably got better things to do at noon on Tuesday, but maybe not. He might be watching. Who knows?
No, I'm sure he's locked in. I'm sure that this is. I'm sure he blocks it off on his calendar. Tuesday at noon, I'm tuning in to Dolphins Deep Dive with my boy Perk.
He might be on the chat right now. Who knows? Under a burner name. Who knows?
Under an alias.
Right. Exactly. All right.
Xavian Howard fan 25. Right.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. Something very discreet like that we'd never suspect. Right. All right, Furones. Let's get into our last segment here, and perhaps it's the most important question: are the Dolphins a playoff team? And we'll do our Jets prediction also. But are these Dolphins a playoff team? And would you want to see them make the playoffs even if they're one and done? I think that they are playoff caliber, and I was skeptical at first, picked them to finish 8-9. Then they beat Buffalo and Baltimore, and I started thinking, all right, well, there's something special with this team, and they get up to 8-3, and I was one of the ones talking about the number one seed and that kind of stuff, and now here we are back down to earth at 8-8. But I still think that they're a playoff team, and even if they were one and done, get to the freaking playoffs, right? I mean, you were 8-3, you've got all this talent, and again, this is a building process. Like, this isn't the year. This is the year where you're building. That hopefully you make the playoffs this year and get a little playoff experience, and next year you make your run, and the year after that you make your run. But, man, you really, really need to get into the playoffs this year. Your thoughts, Furones?
Chris Perkins, I think we all owe you an apology. We all gave you a very hard time over the 8-9 prediction. I felt very good about my 10-7 prediction, and I have given you bleep over this all season about how wrong you were to start the year predicting this team would go 8-9, and that my 10-7 prediction seemed like it was on track, and then maybe even on the low end when they were 8-3.
Right.
And now only your prediction is still alive at this juncture, and mine is no longer. So I think all of Dolphins Twitter, Tuanon, whoever else, myself, we all owe you an apology. Chris Perkins, you were right about this team, even though you flip-flopped during the season.
I did. We're going to edit that part out on the podcast. We're going to edit that out.
But your prediction is still alive, and we'll see if you predict them to indeed lose this game to get to 8-9 or not. But would I like to see this team make the playoffs, even if it's a one-and-done scenario? Yeah, I think the whole tenor of the conversation of the season as a whole changes if, okay, even though they lost these 5 straight, they still ended up getting into the playoffs, and they rebounded in Week 18 and got the help that they need. Now there's a lot of things up in the air for that to happen, including this unfinished Bills-Bengals game from Monday night, and then what happens going forward on the Bills, then going into Week 18 and the Dolphins needing Buffalo to beat New England for Miami to get in. But if those two things were to occur and the Dolphins do get in, then yeah, I think that's ultimately much better than the alternative of finishing with 6 consecutive losses, even if you are absolved of watching a potential beatdown in Kansas City or Cincinnati, Buffalo, wherever that 2-7 matchup ends up taking place. But you want to see that Mike McDaniel made the playoffs in his first year, and that would be something to build off going forward. There's still a lot of adversity that this team dealt with, injuries that this team dealt with, that if you end up making it, that's wonderful. And then who knows? We're not taking it anything further than one day at a time with Tua Tagovailoa. That's what the Dolphins are putting out there. They're not looking into when he can return yet. It's just getting him healthy. But if he is able to then play in the playoffs, and then suddenly you're competitive and you look like the team that went into Buffalo and went down to the wire, down to only losing by a last-second field goal, and you put up that kind of performance, maybe even come through in the end and win instead of falling at the end, then yeah, that's a positive sign going forward, something to build off of. So yes, absolutely, you want to see this team make the playoffs, make the postseason, rebound from what has been a collapse of 5 straight losses to this point, and then not have it just snowball into a complete failure of going down the 6 consecutive losses route and ending up out of the postseason. So yes, it would be better indeed if the Dolphins make the playoffs, and it gives you a chance to compete in that playoff game.
Yeah, it's life is just better if you make the playoffs, right? On pretty much all counts. And Furones,
except the Sentinel travel budget, which would take a hit then if we all have to go somewhere for another week.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But you know what? We'll do such a great job in writing that we'll get so much ad money, it'll be a wash, right?
I'm sure.
Exactly.
We come through. We come through in the postseason. All right. We come through when it's time to be clutch.
That's it, man. So, all right, Furones, and look, we're talking about how we look at this season. we're going back out to Twitter, and we get this question from Carmi Gross, which I think is a very interesting question and topic. Carmi Gross writes, do you think this season has to be taken with a grain of salt? We had high expectations, but we are dealing with a rookie head coach, a quarterback that is finally being trusted, and all the injuries. We, of course, want more as fans, but we need to be realistic. What do you think about taking it with a grain of salt, Furones? Because on the one hand, I think that's a very mature, measured point of view. On the other hand, you're 8-8. Like, how big is this grain of salt got to be? I mean, 9-8 is good if you make the playoffs, I guess. But if you don't make the playoffs and you're 9-8, I'm not sure how big that grain of salt. That's got to be like rock salt, right? That's got to be like a big grain of salt there.
Yeah, I think that's how you viewed the Dolphins starting off the season. Yeah. It was that way. So then if you ultimately arrive there at the end, even if it's through a different route than you expected, then that's one thing. Then I think once you saw the 3-0 start, and especially, it took a lot to win those 3 games. I mean, when you talk about the historic comeback at Baltimore, fourth quarter, 3 scores down, and then the Ravens were giving up these wide open deep touchdowns to Tyreek Hill. They just forgot how to play defense, and then give Tua and Tyreek credit. They performed on that stage, and then obviously the elements in that Week 3 game at home against Buffalo, the heat and humidity, players falling to the ground one by one, and having to exit the game, and then Josh Allen very uncharacteristically throwing an open touchdown to Isaiah McKenzie into the ground. You don't expect that from him, and that went a long way in that victory. And then the 3-game losing streak that followed, you didn't have Tua. Then you were missing Teron Armstead. Xavian Howard went from dealing with one groin to then groins plural on the injury report, and it got worse for him. He had to miss a game as well. So then once you got everyone healthy, you went on this 5-game winning streak against bad teams for the most part. Well, actually, entirely bad teams for all 5 of those. Except now the Steelers and the Lions are back at 500. So, but they were bad at that point in the season for sure. And then now you've run into a tough stretch and you couldn't pull out any of these games. You look at it in totality and all those things. And starting off the season, you took it with a grain of salt because of all those factors, the first-year coach and a lot of movement, a lot of newness in the offense. You thought the defense would be better, but it hasn't, and it's been injury-plagued. And you have to take all these things into account.
Yeah, you do. And look, I will say this. I do think that this could still turn out to be a successful season. But now, only if you make the playoffs. The 9-8 without making the playoffs at the start of the season, like you said, we viewed it differently. Start of the season, 9-8 and not making the playoffs. Okay, yeah, that's acceptable. Not ideal, but acceptable. Now, nah, you can't call it a good season or a successful season without making the playoffs now.
Right. Yeah. The thing is, we saw this team get to 8-3, so the whole scope is completely different if you miss the playoffs. And I think the way you judged it at the beginning is, they fired Brian Flores for having a second consecutive winning season. Granted, owner Steve Ross said it was about his communication and collaboration, and we don't need to go down the rabbit hole of talking about the back and forth between the two sides and the lawsuit that came from it and everything else. But you expected at least, if they made a move at head coach and improved the roster, which they did significantly, adding a player like Tyreek Hill, Teron Armstead, and you go down the line and keeping the defense together that you thought was going to stay together, then, they should have made the playoffs, which is something they didn't do. Right now, they stand at the same place they did at the same point last year, 8-8, and then they were already eliminated last year going into the finale and won it and finished 9-8. Now, you need to finish 9-8. You need to win this game to at least say this team was on par with last year's team. And if it makes the playoffs, if this year that's enough to make the playoffs, then okay, slight improvement. It did work out to get into the postseason, which is kind of what I thought this team would be, was a wild card team going into the year. And if it doesn't transpire, then that's a failure. You judge this team based on if it could improve from being on the verge of a playoff berth to now it's got to get into the playoffs.
Yep, I agree. All right, before we get to our Jets prediction, we'll do our final Twitter question, Furones, and it comes to us from Sean White 85. It's a two-parter. We've covered the first part, but I'll read the whole thing. The questions are, do you think we bring back Boyer? What's the biggest issue with this team going into next year? We discussed Josh Boyer already. Maybe he returns, maybe he doesn't. I guess it'll depend a lot on how the season finishes out and if Mike McDaniel has his own guy in mind. But for the second question, what's the biggest issue with this team going into next year? Furones, now it's quarterback. I mean, I don't think there's not a question now, right? I mean, I think before you could have picked maybe it's the run game, maybe it's the defense, blah, blah, blah. But to me, right now, it's quarterback and what you do at quarterback. What are your thoughts on the biggest question for next year?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and also the health of the team. And there's not much. Are they going to make changes at defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator? But who was that asked that question? Sean White? Is that either the snowboarder or Sean White, the brother of Mike White, the Jets quarterback who Sean White played at University School, also a Broward County high school football product.
Wow, you're going deep. No,
is he undercover on this Dolphins Deep Dive as the brother of Mike White, who may be facing the Dolphins as a Jets quarterback this week?
That's right. That is a note that I have, but that is a real deep dive, Furones. That's why we call this show Deep Dive. But that's
I covered high school football.
His handle is Sean White 85, but that is a deep dive, Furones. Congratulations, man. You get the deep dive prize, man. That is a deep dive. I like that.
Nice.
Like that complete coverage.
This is the time of the year we find out the media's choice for team MVP on this unit. We get to give out the good guy award from the media. It's nice to know I have won an award here on Dolphins Deep Dive with Perk by the Sun Sentinel.
That's it, man. That's it. And so, all right. So it is prediction time. And right here next to my prediction of Dolphins 17, Jets 14, I do have the line that we could have a local QB battle with Bridgewater versus Mike White, but that is my pick. I'm going down with the ship, man. At this point, my 8-9 prediction for the season out the window. That was gone at 3-0. And by the way, that was the week that I gave myself when we did stock up, stock down. Chris Perkins had stock down for when the Dolphins were 3-0. So maybe I was premature on that. But anyway, whatever. I'm going Dolphins 17-14. Do they make the playoffs? Man, Furones, I don't know. I don't know. I think they win this game, but do they get some help from Buffalo beating New England? That seems very likely, but the way the season has ended, I'm not sure. So as far as I'm going is the Dolphins win. They squeak it out 17-14. We'll see on the playoffs. Your thoughts?
Boy, you're playing up this South Florida quarterback battle, and then apparently you don't think they're going to put up many points. 17-14 was the score you said?
That's the score I see it. That's the score. I'm sick of picking all these 27-point outbursts by this offense, Furones. They've taught me they're just going to do enough. So that's what I'm picking.
Okay, and you're also indicating you have faith in this defense now. So
they're at home.
Yes. Yes. They're at home against a bad offense.
Right.
Yeah. Just didn't look very good just last week at Seattle, which hurts the Dolphins even more that they didn't win in New England because they would have clinched had they just won that game, given the Jets' result. The Jets, all they have is to play spoiler in this game because they have now been eliminated. I'm really taking my prediction to this very moment. I haven't even decided in my head, really, as I speak right now, and really, I may still change it before because I need to know who's going to be playing quarterback for these teams, and there's a lot at stake with the Wednesday updates. But I'll say the Dolphins take care of their business. So yeah, I'll say 24-20. Dolphins end up winning this finale at home. It won't be like the 2013 game, if I recall. Dolphins had a win-in scenario, and they lost that one to the Jets. The big Lamar Miller game, he had the big touchdown, but Jets ended up getting that one over Miami and keeping them out of the postseason. I think the Dolphins take care of their business, and then still a lot up in the air with Buffalo, and I mean way more than we could have anticipated. Now with this latest Damar Hamlin situation, which, as we've said ad nauseum on the show, that is at the forefront, is that young man's health, and not the implications on what Buffalo's final now 2 games that it still has remaining have to do with the Dolphins. But so there's a lot in the air on up in the air on what is up at stake for the Bills in going into this game. So wait and see on that front, and we'll see. Hopefully for Dolphins fans, there is something that the Bills are playing for in this game, and then the Dolphins, if they get the help they need, they end up in the postseason. But I have the Dolphins winning 24-20 on Sunday at Hard Rock Stadium.
All right. Well, we'll see how it turns out. Again, thoughts and prayers out to Damar Hamlin and his family. That's your boy Furones. I'm your boy Perk. Tune in next week. Dolphins Deep Dive, noon, sunsentinel.com.